Let me start with an uncomfortable truth. There are people with average ideas who succeed simply because they know how to express themselves. And there are incredibly intelligent people who remain invisible because their thoughts never come out clearly. Maybe you felt this before. You know exactly what you want to say. The idea is crystal clear in your mind. But the moment you open your mouth, something happens. The words feel clumsy. The sentence loses its structure, and later that night, your brain replays the moment again and again. Why didn't I say it that way? That sounded so much better in my head. This isn't rare. It happens in meetings. It happens in relationships. It happens in the moments that quietly shape your life. And here's the frustrating part. Most of us were never actually taught how communication works. School teaches grammar. School teaches vocabulary. But almost nobody teaches you what happens inside your brain when you speak. Why anxiety hijacks your voice. Or why some people can explain ideas so clearly while others struggle even when they understand more. Over the next hour, something important is going to happen. You're going to understand the psychology behind communication, not the surface tricks, but the deeper mechanics. Why words get stuck. Why your mind sometimes goes blank when it matters most, and how people who seem naturally articulate actually trained their thinking. Because the truth is simple. The problem was never that you lack ideas. The problem is that no one ever showed you how to let the world hear them. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single one. It's always interesting to see where this reaches. Extra 1. The invisible battle inside your brain when you speak. Imagine this moment. You are sitting in a meeting. The conversation is moving quickly, and suddenly someone says something you disagree with. Immediately, an idea forms in your mind. It is clear, logical, valuable. You know exactly what you want to say. But when the room turns toward you and the opportunity to speak arrives, your body reacts in a completely different way. Your heart begins to beat faster. Your palms grow slightly damp. Your breathing becomes shallow. And then the strangest thing happens. Your mind goes blank. The idea that felt so organized seconds ago dissolves into fragments. Words that normally come easily suddenly feel distant. You attempt to explain your thought, but the sentence arrives tangled, rushed, and incomplete. Afterward, the moment plays on repeat in your mind. You replay every word you said. You imagine the sentence you wish you had spoken instead. You wonder if everyone noticed your hesitation. And eventually, you ask yourself the question that has quietly followed millions of people through their professional and personal lives. Why does this keep happening to me? Here is the truth most people never discover. That experience has almost nothing to do with intelligence. It has almost everything to do with chemistry. When your brain interprets a situation as threatening, your nervous system activates the same biological response that kept your ancestors alive thousands of years ago. Your brain does not distinguish between standing in front of a group of coworkers and encountering a wild animal on a dark trail. Both situations trigger the same ancient mechanism, the survival response. Within milliseconds, stress hormones begin flooding your bloodstream. Cortisol and adrenaline surge through your body like an alarm bell echoing through your nervous system. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense. Your senses sharpen. From an evolutionary perspective, this response is brilliant. It prepares you to run, fight, or react instantly to physical danger. But when your goal is to calmly deliver a coherent explanation, it becomes a problem. Because one of the first things this survival response disrupts is the exact mental system you rely on to speak clearly. Your working memory. Working memory is the small mental workspace where your brain organizes thoughts, selects words, and structures sentences in real time. It is the invisible desk where your mind lays out ideas before presenting them to the world. Under calm conditions, this workspace is large enough to hold complex ideas. But under stress, something dramatic happens. That workspace shrinks. Imagine trying to prepare a detailed meal in a kitchen that suddenly becomes the size of a small cutting board. You still have the ingredients. You still know the recipe. But there is simply not enough space to assemble everything properly. This is exactly what happens when pressure takes over your nervous system. Your vocabulary temporarily contracts. Your ability to organize ideas weakens. Your sentences become shorter and less precise. And because you experience the result as hesitation or confusion, you mistakenly assume the problem is your ability. But it isn't. It is your brain protecting you. Now here is the part that may surprise you. Confident speakers experience this exact same chemical response. Their hearts race. Their palms sweat. Their nervous system activates just like yours. The difference is not the absence of fear. The difference is interpretation. A beginner surfer sees a large wave and panics. They focus on the danger. They imagine the fall. Their body tightens, and the wave throws them off balance. An experienced surfer sees the same wave and thinks something entirely different. Here we go. Same wave, different interpretation. And because their interpretation changes their response, the same energy that overwhelms the beginner becomes power for the expert. Communication anxiety works exactly the same way. Your body produces energy in moments that matter. The question is whether you interpret that energy as a threat or as preparation. Understanding this is the first step toward reclaiming control over your voice. But there is another layer to what happens inside your mind when you speak. Your brain actually operates through 3 different communication modes. The first mode is reactive communication. This is autopilot. Someone asks a question, and you answer immediately. Your brain reaches for the first thought available and sends it directly to your mouth without much filtering or structure. Reactive communication works perfectly well in casual situations. Talking with friends, joking with family, commenting on everyday topics. But in moments that require precision or persuasion, reactive speech often fails you. The second mode is intentional communication. This is where awareness begins. Instead of immediately reacting, your brain takes a brief pause. You think about how your words might sound before you say them. You organize the thought slightly. You consider the context. Intentional communication requires more energy, but the quality of your expression improves dramatically. Your sentences become clearer. Your tone becomes calmer. Your ideas land more effectively. But the most skilled communicators operate at a third level: strategic communication. At this level, something remarkable happens. Your brain is aware of 3 things simultaneously: your message, your audience, and the direction you want the conversation to move. You are no longer simply expressing ideas. You are guiding an experience. You notice how people respond to what you say. You adjust your explanation based on their reactions. You choose examples and language that help your ideas land more clearly. To an observer, this can look almost effortless, but underneath that calm delivery is a mind that has trained itself to operate with awareness rather than impulse. And once you begin understanding this system, you realize something important. Your brain is not working against you. It is simply following patterns it has learned over time. There is another fascinating mechanism shaping how you experience communication. It is called the reticular activating system. Think of it as your brain's internal algorithm, similar to the system that decides what appears on your social media feed. This filter determines what information your brain notices and what it ignores. If you have spent years telling yourself that you are not a good speaker, this mental algorithm begins highlighting every moment that confirms that belief. You notice every stumble, every awkward pause, every time you wish you had said something differently. Meanwhile, moments where you communicated clearly or made a valuable point quietly disappear from memory. Your brain is not trying to sabotage you. It is simply proving the story you have been telling yourself. But the moment you begin changing that story, something powerful happens. Your brain begins searching for different evidence. You start noticing the moments when your explanation actually worked. The time someone nodded in understanding. The moment a question you asked shifted the entire conversation. Same brain, same experiences, different algorithm, and the transformation continues even deeper than that. When you speak, something remarkable occurs inside the minds of the people listening to you. Their mirror neurons activate. These neurons cause listeners to internally simulate the emotional state of the speaker. In other words, your emotional tone becomes contagious. If you speak with warmth and calm confidence, the listener's brain begins experiencing those same emotions. If you speak with hesitation and doubt, that uncertainty spreads through the room. Your emotional state becomes part of the message itself, which is why preparation matters so much. Preparation is not about memorizing perfect sentences. It is about knowing your ideas so well that your brain can focus on connection rather than scrambling for words. When you understand your material deeply, your mental resources shift. Instead of asking, "What should I say next?" your brain asks, "How can I help this idea land?" And that shift changes everything. There is one final principle I want you to carry with you as we continue. Your brain has limited processing power at any given moment. Think of it like the battery on your phone. If too many applications are running at the same time, everything slows down. Nervous speakers often overload their mental system. They try to remember their message, monitor their body language, evaluate how others are reacting, judge their own performance, and continue speaking all at once. It is no wonder the system crashes. Skilled communicators simplify this process. They automate parts of their delivery through practice. They develop mental frameworks for organizing thoughts quickly. They become comfortable with pauses, and by freeing mental space, they allow their mind to focus on what truly matters. Connecting with people, reading the room, delivering ideas with clarity. Understanding the science behind communication does something incredibly powerful. It removes shame. Because once you see what is actually happening inside your brain, you stop blaming yourself for experiences that were never personal failures in the first place. You begin replacing confusion with strategy, and strategy is the first step toward mastery. But understanding your brain is only part of the story. Because long before you ever open your mouth to speak, another conversation is already taking place. The conversation happening inside your own mind. And that voice inside your head has more influence over your communication than almost anything else. Chapter 2. Taming the voice inside your head. Long before a single word leaves your mouth, another conversation is already happening. It is quiet. It is fast. And most of the time, you barely notice it. But it is there. The voice inside your head. Right now, as you listen to these ideas, that voice is active. Perhaps it is agreeing. Perhaps it is questioning. Perhaps it is quietly saying, "This sounds helpful, but I'm not sure it will work for me." Whatever it is saying, one thing is certain. That inner voice has enormous influence over the way you communicate. In fact, by the time you open your mouth to speak, that voice has already shaped your posture, your breathing, your confidence, and even the words you are about to choose. Most people assume communication begins with speech. It doesn't. It begins with thought. The internal dialogue running inside your mind is like a script that directs the entire performance of your communication. If that script is supportive, curious, and grounded, your words tend to flow more easily. Your body relaxes. Your tone becomes natural. But if that script is harsh, critical, or fearful, everything changes. Your shoulders tighten. Your breath shortens. Your voice becomes cautious. And suddenly speaking feels like walking across thin ice. Now here is something important to understand. Your inner voice is not an objective narrator. It is a storyteller. It constructs interpretations about the world based on past experiences, emotional memories, and learned beliefs. Over time, those interpretations can become so familiar that you stop questioning them. You simply assume they are true. Picture two people preparing for the exact same job interview. Person A's inner voice whispers, "They're going to see right through me. I'm not as prepared as the other candidates. I'm probably going to freeze when they ask something difficult." Person B's inner voice says something very different. "I've prepared for this. I have real experiences to share. Let's see how I can show them what I bring to the table." Same interview, same opportunity. But the internal experience of these two people is completely different. And those internal experiences inevitably shape external reality. Because the story you tell yourself affects everything downstream. Thought creates feeling. Feeling shapes the body. The body shapes delivery. And delivery shapes outcome. That chain reaction happens faster than you realize. If the thought is, "I'm going to embarrass myself," your body begins preparing for danger. Your muscles tighten. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your mind starts scanning for mistakes. And suddenly your ability to speak clearly becomes compromised. But if the thought is, "I have something valuable to contribute," your body prepares differently. Your breathing steadies. Your attention shifts outward. Your voice becomes more grounded. The difference begins inside your mind. Now let me say something gently but honestly. Your inner voice did not invent its script on its own. It learned it. Many of the thoughts you hear today were shaped years ago by experiences you may barely remember. Perhaps there was a teacher who embarrassed you when you answered a question incorrectly. Perhaps a classmate laughed at how you pronounced a word. Perhaps a parent corrected you in a way that made you feel small rather than supported. Moments like these may seem minor at the time, but the brain records emotional experiences with incredible precision. When embarrassment or rejection happens during speaking, your nervous system stores that memory as a warning. The next time you find yourself in a similar situation, speaking in front of others, sharing an opinion, asking a question, the brain reactivates the old script. It says, "Be careful. This might go badly." But here is the part that fills me with hope for you. Your brain is not fixed. It is adaptable. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new pathways throughout your life. The connections in your mind are not permanent roads carved into stone. They are more like trails through a forest, and trails can be redirected. Every time you consciously challenge an unhelpful thought, you begin weakening the old path and strengthening a new one. At first, the change feels awkward. Your mind may still default to the familiar script, but with repetition, something remarkable happens. The new pathway becomes easier to travel. The process begins with awareness. For the next several days, I invite you to observe your inner voice with curiosity rather than judgment. Notice what it says before different kinds of conversations. Pay attention to the difference between how you speak to yourself before meeting a close friend versus before sharing an idea in a meeting. You may discover something surprising. Your inner voice is not constant. It changes depending on the situation. When the stakes feel low, your inner dialogue might be relaxed and supportive. But when the stakes feel high, when approval, reputation, or opportunity seems to be on the line, that voice often becomes harsher. It warns. It criticizes. It predicts failure before the conversation even begins. Once you recognize this pattern, you gain the ability to challenge it. One powerful technique used by elite performers in many fields is mental rehearsal. Before important moments, they close their eyes and imagine themselves performing well. They picture the room. They imagine making eye contact. They hear their voice speaking clearly. They visualize themselves responding calmly to unexpected questions. This is not fantasy. It is neurological training. When you vividly imagine a successful experience, your brain activates many of the same neural pathways that would fire during the real event. In a sense, you are practicing success before the moment arrives. Professional athletes have relied on this technique for decades, and communicators can use it just as effectively. But visualization alone is not enough. You must also address the deeper beliefs driving communication anxiety. In my experience, most speaking fears can be traced back to three fundamental concerns: the fear of being judged, the fear of being rejected, and the fear of not being enough. When these fears dominate your thinking, every conversation begins to feel like an audition. You walk into the room thinking, "I hope they approve of me." And when life becomes a constant audition, anxiety is inevitable. Confident communicators approach conversations differently. They adopt what I call a contribution mindset. Instead of asking, "Do they like me?" they ask, "How can I add value here?" Instead of focusing on protecting their image, they focus on sharing something useful. This subtle shift changes the emotional equation entirely. Because when your goal becomes contribution rather than approval, the pressure begins to dissolve. You are no longer performing. You are participating. Of course, your brain may resist this shift at first. It wants evidence, so give it some. Start collecting small moments that demonstrate your ability to communicate effectively. Maybe someone thanked you for explaining something clearly. Maybe a question you asked helped clarify a discussion. Maybe a friend told you they appreciate how you listen. Write these moments down. Your brain has been gathering evidence against you for years. It is time to start building the case for you. There is another simple but powerful shift you can experiment with. When you feel nervous before speaking, instead of telling yourself, "I'm anxious," try telling yourself something different. Say, "I'm excited." Physiologically, anxiety and excitement are nearly identical. Both increase heart rate. Both sharpen attention. Both energize the body. The only real difference is the label your mind assigns to those sensations. Change the label, and the meaning of the experience begins to change. Finally, I want you to remember something that many people forget. Perfect speakers do not exist. Even the most articulate people you admire have stumbled over words. They have lost their train of thought. They have said things that came out awkwardly. The difference is how they interpret those moments. They do not treat them as disasters. They treat them as normal. A brief pause, a small correction, then they move forward. Because they understand something important. Communication is not about perfection. It is about connection. And connection does not require flawless delivery. It requires honesty, presence, and the willingness to show up even when your voice shakes. The inner voice that truly changes everything is not the one that constantly praises you. It is the one that calmly reminds you of the truth. You prepared, you care, and you have something meaningful to share. When that voice becomes stronger than the one whispering doubt, speaking begins to feel very different. And once that shift takes hold, another powerful dimension of communication becomes visible. Because whether you realize it or not, every time you interact with another person, something else is speaking alongside your words. Your body. Chapter 3. Your body is always talking. Let me begin this chapter with a truth that may surprise you. Long before people evaluate your words, they evaluate your body. Before your first sentence is finished, the people listening to you have already formed impressions about your confidence, your credibility, your emotional state, and even your level of authority. And most of those impressions are based on signals you never consciously intended to send. Your posture, your facial expression, your eye contact, the rhythm of your breathing, the way you move your hands. Your body is constantly transmitting information, like a radio station that never stops broadcasting. And here is the important part. People tend to believe the signal of the body more than the content of the words. You could say, "I'm very confident about this idea," but if your shoulders are collapsed, your eyes are avoiding contact, and your voice is tight with tension, the people listening will trust what they see rather than what they hear. This is not because people are consciously analyzing your body language. It is because the human brain evolved to detect nonverbal cues long before complex language existed. Thousands of years ago, survival depended on quickly reading whether another human being was calm, angry, trustworthy, or dangerous. Those ancient instincts still operate today. Your audience may not consciously say, "Their posture looks uncertain," but their nervous system registers the signal immediately, which means communication is not just verbal, it is physical. And the good news is that your body is not only something others read, it is also something that shapes how you feel internally. Your body influences your mind just as powerfully as your mind influences your body. Let's start with posture. When people hear the word posture, they often imagine rigid, military-style stiffness. Chest out, shoulders pulled back, standing like a statue. But that is not what effective posture looks like. Effective posture is grounded openness. Your spine is upright but relaxed. Your shoulders rest naturally rather than collapsing forward. Your chest remains open, allowing your breathing to move freely. Your head is balanced rather than tilted downward. This position does more than create a confident appearance. It actually changes your internal chemistry. Studies have shown that adopting open, expansive body positions can reduce stress hormones and increase hormones associated with confidence and calm focus. In other words, the way you arrange your body in space sends signals directly to your nervous system. When you physically expand your posture, your brain receives the message that the environment is safe. But when you collapse inward, shoulders rounded, arms folded tightly, chin tucked downward, the opposite signal is sent. Your brain interprets the contraction as vulnerability. It shifts toward caution. Your thinking becomes more guarded, and your words often follow. In this way, posture is not just communication with others, it is communication with yourself. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful forms of human connection: eye contact. Eye contact is where presence lives. When you look someone calmly in the eyes while speaking, you communicate something deeply human. You are saying without words, I am here with you. Eye contact conveys sincerity, confidence, and openness. It tells the other person that you are not hiding from the interaction. But like many powerful tools, balance matters. Too little eye contact makes you appear uncertain or disengaged. Too much can feel intense or confrontational. In one-on-one conversation, a helpful guideline is to maintain eye contact roughly 70% of the time while listening and slightly less while speaking. In group settings, the dynamic changes. Instead of trying to look at everyone at once, which often results in an unfocused scanning motion, choose one person at a time. Hold their gaze for a complete thought, perhaps 3 to 5 seconds. Then gently shift your attention to someone in a different part of the room. When you repeat this pattern, everyone in the audience experiences moments of direct connection. Next, consider your face. Your facial expressions act as emotional punctuation marks in your communication. They underline meaning. They signal whether your words are serious, enthusiastic, thoughtful, or playful. Imagine someone telling an exciting story with the expression of someone reading a tax document. The mismatch creates confusion. The listener struggles to interpret the emotional message. But when your face naturally reflects the feeling behind your words, the message becomes clearer and more engaging. This does not mean exaggerating expressions or performing emotions. It simply means allowing your genuine reactions to be visible rather than suppressing them out of self-consciousness. Now let's move to something many nervous speakers struggle with: hands. When anxiety rises, the body looks for ways to release energy. That energy often shows up as small, repetitive movements: fidgeting with a pen, adjusting clothing repeatedly, tapping fingers, shifting weight back and forth. These movements may feel harmless, but they quietly signal nervousness to observers. Confident communicators use their hands differently. Their gestures support their message. When explaining a broad concept, their hands may open outward. When describing a precise detail, their gesture becomes smaller and more focused. When emphasizing a key point, a deliberate movement anchors the idea visually. Think of gestures as physical illustrations that accompany your words. But remember that scale matters. A casual conversation at a coffee table requires subtle gestures. A presentation on a stage may require larger movements so people in the back of the room can see them clearly. Your hands should amplify your message, not distract from it. Now let's consider another crucial element of physical communication: your voice. Although we often think of the voice as purely verbal, it carries powerful nonverbal signals as well. Your pace communicates emotional energy. Speaking too quickly can overwhelm listeners and reveal nervousness. Speaking too slowly may create the impression of uncertainty. Strategic variation is the key. Slow down when explaining complex ideas so the listener has time to process them. Increase your pace slightly when building excitement or momentum. And perhaps most important of all, learn to embrace pauses. Many people fear silence in conversation. They rush to fill every gap with words, often inserting filler sounds like or you know. But silence is not the enemy of communication. Silence is emphasis. A pause before a key idea builds anticipation. A pause afterward allows the idea to settle into the listener's mind. Great speakers understand that pauses are not empty moments. They are spaces where meaning grows stronger. Breathing plays a crucial role here as well. When people are nervous, their breathing often shifts to shallow chest breathing. This restricts airflow and creates a thin, strained vocal tone. But when you breathe deeply from the diaphragm, allowing the belly to expand during inhalation, your voice becomes fuller and more stable. Before an important conversation, Try taking 3 slow, deep breaths. Feel the air moving downward into your abdomen. This simple action sends a powerful signal to your nervous system that you are safe. Your body begins to relax, and your voice naturally follows. Finally, consider the concept of space. Confident communicators occupy space comfortably. They do not shrink into corners or hide behind objects. They stand or sit in a way that signals belonging. But confidence is not about dominating space either. It is about balanced presence, occupying your place while respecting the presence of others. When your body communicates calm openness, something remarkable happens. People begin to relax around you. They become more receptive to your ideas, because at a deep level, human beings are constantly asking one silent question during interaction. Is this person safe to engage with? When your body language answers yes, your words gain strength. Because communication is not only what you say, it is how your entire presence carries the message. And once your body and voice begin supporting your ideas instead of working against them, another powerful dimension of communication begins to unfold. The words you choose themselves start shaping the emotional landscape of every conversation. Chapter 4. The words you choose are building worlds. Let me offer you an idea that may change how you think about language forever. Every word you speak does two things at the same time. It communicates information, and it shapes emotion. Most people focus only on the first part. They treat language as a tool for transferring ideas, a simple delivery system that moves thoughts from one mind to another. But communication is far more powerful than that. Words do not just describe reality. They influence how people experience reality. Consider a small example. Imagine someone in your workplace says, "We have a problem with this project." Even before the conversation continues, that single word, problem, begins shaping the emotional atmosphere of the room. It suggests something is wrong. Someone may be at fault. There may be tension or conflict ahead. Now imagine the same situation described slightly differently. "We have a challenge with this project." The factual situation may be identical, but emotionally, the landscape shifts. The word challenge invites curiosity. It suggests something to solve rather than something to blame. The brain reacts differently to these two words, even though they refer to the same situation. That is the hidden power of language. The words you choose become emotional instructions for the people listening to you. They guide how others interpret the situation, how they feel about it, and often how they respond. Now let's be clear about something. This is not about manipulation. It is about awareness. When you understand the emotional impact of language, you begin choosing words that help conversations move toward clarity, collaboration, and progress rather than tension or defensiveness. You begin speaking with intention. One reason communication sometimes falls flat is that people rely on a very small portion of the vocabulary they actually know. Most adults actively use only a few thousand words in everyday speech, yet their passive vocabulary, the words they recognize when reading or listening, may be 5 or even 10 times larger. Imagine owning a large box of colored pencils, but only ever drawing with the same 3 colors. The picture you produce will be limited. Language works the same way. A richer working vocabulary allows you to express ideas with greater precision. It allows you to choose the word that perfectly fits the emotional and intellectual tone of the moment. But here is an important caution. Expanding your vocabulary does not mean using complicated words. Many people mistakenly believe that sounding articulate requires using impressive or obscure language. In reality, this often has the opposite effect. If your listener has to mentally translate your words before understanding them, you have created distance rather than clarity. True articulation is not about complexity. It is about precision. The most effective communicators use language that is clear, vivid, and natural. Their words are simple enough to understand immediately, but precise enough to convey exactly what they mean. Instead of searching for sophisticated vocabulary, focus on choosing the word that best fits the moment. The one that captures the idea accurately. The one that allows the listener to feel what you are describing. This principle becomes especially powerful during moments of disagreement. Imagine you are in a meeting and someone presents an idea you believe is flawed. One option is to say directly, "You're wrong about this. Technically, you may be correct." But what happens emotionally when those words are spoken? The conversation shifts from exploration to defense. The other person feels attacked. Their attention moves away from the idea and toward protecting their identity. Now imagine approaching the same disagreement differently. I've arrived at a different conclusion, and I'd like to walk you through my thinking. The disagreement still exists, but the emotional climate changes completely. Your words have created space for dialogue rather than conflict. The difference between those two responses is not intelligence. It is word choice. Emotionally intelligent language respects the listener while still expressing your own perspective clearly. Another habit that quietly weakens communication is the use of filler words. You have heard them countless times. Like, you know, sort of, kind of. These words often appear when a speaker is thinking in real time. They are verbal placeholders used to fill silence while the mind searches for the next idea. But over time, excessive filler words dilute the impact of your message. They make statements sound uncertain even when the idea behind them is strong. Compare these two sentences. I think maybe we should kind of consider possibly trying this approach. Versus, I recommend we try this approach. The core idea is similar, but the second version carries clarity and confidence. It communicates decisiveness without aggression. When you become comfortable allowing brief pauses instead of filling space with unnecessary words, your communication immediately becomes more powerful. Pauses give your thoughts time to organize. They also give your listeners time to absorb what you are saying. Another powerful tool in language is metaphor. Human beings understand the world through comparison. When you connect a new idea to something familiar, you make it easier for others to grasp. Instead of explaining a complex organizational issue in abstract terms, imagine saying something like this. Right now, our departments are working like musicians practicing in separate rooms. Everyone is talented individually, but when we come together, the music doesn't align because we're not following the same score. That image immediately communicates the problem in a way that pure analysis might struggle to achieve. Metaphors translate complexity into experience. They allow the listener not just to understand an idea, but to feel it. The rhythm of your language matters as well. Short sentences create impact. They land quickly and with force. Longer sentences allow you to explore nuance, guiding the listener through a more complex thought. When these two rhythms are combined, short for emphasis, long for exploration, your communication gains a natural flow that keeps people engaged. This rhythm is one of the subtle signatures of skilled speakers and writers. There is another category of words that deserves careful attention. Power words. Words like transform, breakthrough, essential, and remarkable carry emotional intensity. They create stronger images and reactions than neutral alternatives. But power words must be used sparingly. If every sentence contains dramatic language, the effect disappears. Just as a meal with too much spice overwhelms the palate, excessive emotional language dulls the listener's attention. Strategic emphasis is what gives powerful words their impact. Use them when the moment truly deserves it. Finally, remember that building your communication ability is not a one-time effort. It is an ongoing process. The most articulate people are constantly refining their language. They pay attention to how others express ideas effectively. They read widely. They listen to thoughtful speakers. And when they encounter a word or phrase that resonates, they experiment with it. They try it in conversation. They observe how it feels. Over time, those new expressions move from recognition into active use. Gradually, their ability to describe complex ideas becomes more natural. Their vocabulary becomes not just larger, but more precise. And as their language grows sharper, something interesting happens. Their thinking becomes sharper as well, because language and thought are deeply connected. When you learn to express ideas with clarity, you are not just improving communication. You are refining the way your mind organizes the world. But words alone are not the entire story. Even perfectly chosen language can fall flat if it is delivered with a weak or unstable voice. Which brings us to one of the most overlooked dimensions of communication: your voice itself. Because your voice is not just a vehicle for words, it is an instrument. And like any instrument, it can be trained. Chapter 5. Your voice is an instrument. Learn to play it. Close your eyes for a moment and think about a voice that immediately captures your attention. It might belong to a teacher you once admired, someone who could explain even the most complicated idea in a way that felt simple and compelling. It might be a podcast host whose voice makes you feel as if you are sitting across the table from them, having a conversation late into the evening. Or perhaps it is a speaker whose presence seems to fill an entire room before they even finish their first sentence. Now ask yourself something important. What exactly makes that voice so powerful? It is rarely the words alone. It is the delivery. The tone carries warmth. The pace feels intentional. The pauses give ideas space to breathe. The voice rises and falls in ways that guide the listener through the message. Even silence becomes part of the rhythm. In other words, the voice becomes an instrument. And like any instrument, it can be learned, refined, and mastered. Most people never realize this. They assume the voice they have is simply the voice they were given, something fixed and unchangeable. So they speak without thinking about it consciously, allowing nervousness, tension, or habit to determine how they sound. But once you begin to understand how the voice actually works, something powerful happens. You move from being a passenger in your own communication to becoming the conductor. Everything begins with breath. Breathing may seem too basic to deserve attention, yet it forms the entire foundation of vocal strength. The quality of your breath determines the quality of your voice. Many adults fall into the habit of shallow chest breathing. You can see this when someone speaks and their shoulders rise with each inhale. This pattern restricts airflow and forces the voice to operate with limited support. The result is a strained, thin sound that often runs out of air halfway through a sentence. But when breathing originates deeper in the body, through the diaphragm, everything changes. Diaphragmatic breathing allows the lungs to fill more fully. The abdomen expands slightly as air enters, and the chest remains relatively relaxed. This deeper breath provides the steady airflow needed for a full, stable voice. If you want to feel the difference, try a simple exercise. Place one hand gently on your chest and the other on your stomach. Take a slow breath through your nose. If your stomach moves outward while your chest stays mostly still, you are engaging the diaphragm correctly. This breathing style takes practice, especially if your body has been conditioned to shallow breathing for years. But once it becomes natural, the impact on your voice is dramatic. Your words become steadier, your sentences flow more easily, and you can project your voice without shouting. Breath is the engine, but resonance is the instrument's body. Think about a guitar string vibrating on its own. The sound is thin and faint. But when that vibration resonates inside the wooden body of the guitar, it becomes rich and full. Your voice works the same way. The sound begins in the vocal cords, but its richness depends on where it resonates in your body. When the throat is relaxed and the breath is supported, vibrations travel through the chest, the throat, and the cavities of the face. This creates warmth and depth in the sound. A helpful way to experience resonance is to hum softly with your lips closed. As you do this, notice the gentle vibration in your chest and face. That vibration is resonance. When you transition from humming to speaking while maintaining that vibration, your voice naturally becomes fuller. Unfortunately, nervousness often causes the opposite effect. When people feel anxious, they tighten the muscles in their throat. This constriction blocks resonance and produces a squeezed, restricted tone. The voice becomes thinner and less expressive. Learning to relax the throat while maintaining breath support is one of the fastest ways to improve vocal presence. Another critical element of vocal communication is pitch variation. Imagine listening to someone speak in the same tone for several minutes. Even if the information is valuable, your attention begins to drift. The brain is wired to detect change, and a completely flat voice provides none. Great speakers treat pitch the way a painter uses color. They lower their pitch when delivering a decisive statement. Lower tones often convey authority and finality, which makes them useful when emphasizing important conclusions. They raise their pitch slightly when introducing a new idea or asking a question. This signals curiosity and invites engagement. The goal is not dramatic theatrical changes. It is natural variation. Just enough movement in the voice to keep the listener's attention alive. One common pattern worth avoiding is something often called uptalk. Uptalk occurs when statements end with a rising pitch, making them sound like questions even when they are not. When overused, this pattern subtly undermines credibility because it suggests uncertainty about what is being said. Instead, allow important statements to land with a calm, downward tone. This gives your words a sense of completion. Another tool that separates effective communicators from average ones is the pause. Many speakers rush through their ideas as if silence were dangerous. They fill every moment with sound, afraid that even a brief pause will expose nervousness or confusion. But silence, used intentionally, is one of the most powerful tools you have. A pause before an important idea creates anticipation. It signals to the listener that something meaningful is about to arrive. A pause after an important idea gives the listener time to absorb it. Without these pauses, even brilliant insights can pass unnoticed because the mind has no time to process them. Silence is not emptiness. It is emphasis. Professional performers understand this instinctively. Musicians allow notes to fade before introducing the next phrase. Actors pause before delivering a crucial line. Communicators can do the same. The rhythm of speech also matters. Complex explanations benefit from slower pacing, giving the listener's mind time to follow the logic step by step. High-energy storytelling may move more quickly, building excitement and momentum. And when you arrive at your most important point, slow down. Let the moment breathe. The listener's brain will instinctively recognize that something significant is happening. Before important speaking moments, vocal warm-ups can make a noticeable difference. Athletes stretch before competition. Musicians tune their instruments before performing. Your voice deserves the same preparation. A few minutes of humming, gentle lip trills, or simple articulation exercises can loosen the muscles involved in speech. This preparation helps the voice sound warm and fluid instead of tight and restricted. Articulation itself is another vital skill. Clear articulation means shaping each word distinctly so that the listener does not need to struggle to understand you. When syllables blur together or the ends of words disappear, the listener must expend extra effort simply to decode the message. That effort distracts from the meaning of what you are saying. Clarity, therefore, is not about sounding formal. It is about making your message easy to receive. And that is an act of generosity toward the people listening to you. The most encouraging aspect of voice development is that improvement compounds quickly. Each day you practice breathing deeply, relaxing your throat, varying your pitch, and allowing space for pauses. Your voice becomes more expressive and natural. Eventually, these techniques stop feeling like techniques. They become habits. Your voice begins to feel less like something that happens to you and more like something you can shape intentionally. But as powerful as the voice can be, even the most beautiful delivery cannot compensate for a deeper failure in communication. Because communication is not a performance. It is a relationship between two minds. And that relationship becomes stronger or weaker depending on one skill that many people overlook. Listening. Chapter 6. Listening is your secret superpower. At this point, you might expect that becoming a powerful communicator is mostly about speaking well. But here is a paradox that surprises many people. The fastest way to become a better speaker is to become a better listener. This sounds counterintuitive at first. After all, this audiobook is about expressing yourself clearly. But the truth is that communication is not a one-way transmission of words. It is a dynamic exchange between two minds. And the more accurately you understand the person in front of you, the more precisely you can shape what you say. Think about the most satisfying conversations you have ever had. They probably were not the ones where someone delivered a flawless speech. They were the moments when you felt truly understood. When the other person listened with such attention that you felt seen rather than evaluated. That experience leaves a powerful impression, and it is something that exceptional communicators create intentionally. Listening deeply gives you access to information that transforms the quality of everything you say afterward. You begin to notice what the other person actually cares about. You hear not only the literal words, but the emotional meaning behind them. You detect concerns, hopes, frustrations, and assumptions that might never be stated directly. Armed with that understanding, your responses become sharper, more relevant, and more persuasive. To someone experiencing it, it feels almost magical. They walk away thinking, "That person really gets me." But there is no magic involved. There is simply attention. Real listening is far more demanding than most people realize. It requires your mind to process several layers of information at once. First, there are the words themselves, the literal message being spoken. Second, there is the emotional current underneath those words. Is the person excited, frustrated, uncertain, defensive? Third, There are the underlying assumptions shaping what they say. What beliefs or expectations are guiding their perspective? And finally, there are the needs that may not be expressed openly at all. Most people listen only to the first layer. They hear the words and respond to the surface topic. But skilled listeners move deeper. Imagine someone saying, "I think we should consider another option for this project." A surface-level listener hears a suggestion about changing the project's direction. A deeper listener might detect something else, perhaps uncertainty about the current plan, perhaps frustration about not being consulted earlier, perhaps a need to feel that their expertise is valued. Each of these interpretations invites a different response. When you recognize the deeper layer, your reply addresses what is truly happening rather than what merely appears on the surface. Unfortunately, one of the biggest obstacles to this kind of listening is your own mind. While another person is speaking, most people are already preparing their reply. They evaluate whether they agree or disagree. They search for a clever response. They mentally rehearse what they want to say next. All of this internal activity competes with the act of listening. It is like trying to hear someone speak in a crowded restaurant while your own thoughts are shouting in your ear. The discipline of true listening means noticing when your mind begins composing a response and gently returning your attention to the speaker. You do not criticize yourself for drifting. You simply redirect your focus again and again. This type of attention has an extraordinary effect on the other person. People can feel when they are being listened to fully. Your posture becomes slightly forward. Your eyes remain engaged. Your responses connect directly to what they said, rather than jumping to unrelated ideas. That level of presence communicates respect, and respect opens doors. When people feel understood, they become dramatically more receptive to your perspective. Another powerful listening technique is reflection. Before immediately sharing your own view, briefly summarize what you believe the other person is saying. Not by repeating their exact words, but by demonstrating that you have understood both the content and the feeling behind them. For example, if someone says, "I'm exhausted from all these deadline changes. It feels like nothing I do matters because the goalposts keep moving." You might respond with something like this: "It sounds like the constant changes are making it difficult for you to feel that your work is actually making progress." This kind of response communicates something profound. You are not just waiting for your turn to speak. You are genuinely trying to understand. Questions are another powerful tool in deep listening. But not all questions are equal. Closed questions, the ones that can be answered with a simple yes or no, often shut conversations down quickly. Leading questions, which subtly push the other person toward a specific answer, feel manipulative and usually damage trust. The most effective questions are open and curious. They invite exploration rather than defense. Instead of asking, "Don't you think we should try a different approach?" you might ask, "What factors do you think we should consider before deciding our next step?" Instead of asking, "Are you satisfied with the result?" you might ask, "What parts of this outcome feel successful to you, and what parts might still need improvement?" Questions like these encourage deeper thinking and show that you value the other person's perspective. Listening also involves your body. Your posture, facial expression, and eye contact communicate whether you are engaged or distracted. Leaning slightly forward signals interest. Maintaining relaxed eye contact shows presence. Even your facial expression matters. If someone is sharing something difficult, a serious and attentive expression communicates empathy. If they are sharing excitement, a warm smile reflects shared enthusiasm. These subtle signals reinforce the message that their words matter. There is another listening skill that many people overlook: the ability to tolerate silence. When someone finishes speaking, the instinctive reaction is often to jump in immediately. But sometimes the most meaningful part of a conversation comes after a brief pause. When a speaker senses that you are still fully present, that you are not rushing to respond, they often continue. And what they say next is frequently more honest, more reflective, and more important than the first statement. Silence creates space for deeper thoughts to surface. Advanced listeners also learn to notice what is not being said. Certain topics may be avoided. Emotional reactions may appear out of proportion to the words being spoken. There may be tension beneath a calm explanation. These signals suggest deeper concerns. By gently exploring them, you help bring hidden thoughts into the open where they can be addressed constructively. Listening becomes even more powerful during conflict. When people feel ignored or misunderstood, their defensiveness intensifies. They cling more tightly to their position. The conversation becomes a battle. But when someone feels heard, something remarkable happens. Their emotional intensity begins to soften. They may still disagree with you, but they become more willing to consider your perspective because you have shown them something they deeply need: respect. Listening does not mean surrendering your own views. It means acknowledging that the other person's experience is real. That acknowledgement creates the psychological safety necessary for meaningful dialogue. If you practice this skill consistently, you will begin to notice a shift. People will open up more easily around you. Conversations will become more thoughtful. And when you do speak, your words will carry far more weight, because they will be grounded in genuine understanding. Yet even with strong listening skills, some conversations remain difficult. There are moments when tension is high, emotions are strong, and the stakes feel personal. These are the conversations most people avoid. But they are also the ones that shape relationships, careers, and personal integrity more than any others. Learning to navigate them skillfully is one of the most valuable abilities you can develop. Chapter 7. Navigating the conversations. Everyone avoids. There are conversations that flow easily. You talk with friends, you exchange ideas with colleagues, you laugh, share stories, and move through the interaction without much effort. But then there are the other conversations. The ones that sit quietly in the back of your mind for days. The ones you rehearse in the shower. The ones you replay in your head late at night. The ones where your heart begins to beat faster before the discussion even begins. Maybe it is the conversation with a colleague who keeps taking credit for your work. Maybe it is the difficult feedback you need to give someone you care about. Maybe it is a tension in a relationship that has been building quietly for months. Most people handle these situations in one of two ways. They avoid them, or they confront them with so much emotional force that the conversation explodes before anything productive can happen. Both approaches create damage. Avoidance allows resentment to grow quietly over time. What begins as a small frustration slowly becomes a deeper wound because nothing was addressed. Aggressive confrontation creates a different kind of harm. Instead of solving the issue, it triggers defensiveness, anger, and distance. But there is another path. Difficult conversations, when handled well, can actually strengthen relationships. They create clarity. They restore trust. They allow problems to be addressed before they grow into something far more destructive. The key is understanding where the real difficulty lies. Most people assume the problem is the topic itself. In reality, the difficulty almost always lives in the emotions surrounding the topic. When conversations involve identity, respect, or personal values, the brain interprets the situation as a threat. The same stress response we discussed earlier begins to activate. The fight-or-flight system takes control. Rational thinking becomes harder. Two intelligent adults who normally communicate well suddenly behave like defensive opponents. Your job in these moments is not simply to deliver your message. Your job is to protect the conditions that allow rational conversation to continue. That begins with preparation. But preparation for difficult conversations does not mean building the strongest argument. Most people prepare by constructing a mental case. They gather examples. They rehearse counter-arguments. They anticipate everything the other person might say. In other words, they prepare for a battle. And when you enter a conversation expecting battle, the outcome almost always reflects that expectation. A better approach begins with a different question. What outcome do I actually want from this conversation? Not what do I want to say. What do I want to achieve? Do you want a specific behavior to change? Do you want the other person to understand your experience? Are you hoping to repair tension that has developed between you? Are you seeking clarity about something that has been confusing? Once your goal becomes clear, every word you choose can serve that goal. Without that clarity, conversations often drift into emotional reactions that solve nothing. The next step is perspective. Before entering a difficult conversation, spend time genuinely trying to understand the situation from the other person's point of view. This does not mean agreeing with them. It means asking yourself questions such as, what pressures might they be under? What fears might influence their behavior? What needs might they be trying to meet? What assumptions might they have about the situation? When you approach the conversation with genuine curiosity about their perspective, something subtle but powerful changes. Your energy shifts from accusation to exploration, and people can feel that shift immediately. Language also plays a critical role. Certain phrases almost guarantee defensiveness. Statements that begin with "you always" or "you never" are particularly dangerous. They transform a specific situation into a character judgment. You always ignore my input. You never listen to what I say. Even if the underlying concern is legitimate, these statements invite resistance. The other person's attention moves away from the issue and toward defending their identity. A more effective approach focuses on your experience rather than their character. Instead of saying, "You don't respect my time," you might say, "I feel frustrated when meeting times change without notice because it makes it difficult for me to plan my day." This phrasing does three important things. It describes the situation clearly. It explains how the situation affects you, and it leaves room for the other person to respond without feeling attacked. Timing also matters more than people realize. A difficult conversation attempted when someone is exhausted, distracted, or already stressed is unlikely to succeed. Choose a moment when both people have the emotional space to engage. Privacy is important as well. When people feel embarrassed or exposed in front of others, their instinctive reaction is to defend themselves rather than listen. Setting matters. Environment matters. And sometimes the wisest choice is to pause. If emotions become too intense during the conversation, you can say something like, "This is important to me, and I want to talk about it in a way that helps us move forward. Could we take a little time to think about it and come back to it tomorrow?" This is not avoidance. It is emotional intelligence. The opening of the conversation also shapes everything that follows. Beginning with accusation almost guarantees resistance. Beginning with appreciation or positive intention creates psychological safety. A simple statement such as, "I value our working relationship, and I'd like to talk about something that's been on my mind," because I think addressing it will help both of us. This signals that the conversation is about improvement rather than blame. During the conversation itself, emotional regulation becomes critical. When someone says something that triggers frustration or hurt, your body may react instantly. Your jaw tightens. Your breathing shortens. Your thoughts begin forming defensive responses. In that moment, the pause becomes your most powerful tool. Take a breath. Allow a few seconds before responding. That brief gap between stimulus and response gives your rational mind the chance to remain in control. If emotions escalate despite your efforts, lowering your voice rather than raising it often helps de-escalate the situation. Slow your speech. Acknowledge the other person's feelings. You might say something like, "I can see that this is important to you, and I want to understand your perspective." Acknowledging emotion does not mean agreeing with the other person's interpretation. It simply shows that you are taking their experience seriously, and that often reduces the intensity of their reaction. Another key skill is listening for needs rather than positions. When someone insists strongly on a specific outcome, there is usually a deeper need underneath that demand. For example, if a colleague insists that meetings must be shortened, the deeper need may not actually be about the length of meetings. It might be about feeling that their time is respected, or about needing uninterrupted focus time for complex work. When you identify the underlying need, creative solutions often emerge. Sometimes the solution is not the one either person originally suggested. Not every difficult conversation resolves immediately. Some issues require multiple discussions. Emotional reactions may need time to settle before meaningful progress can occur. Ending a conversation respectfully, even without full agreement, preserves the relationship and allows the dialogue to continue later. And remember something essential. The goal of a difficult conversation is rarely to win. The goal is to understand. Even when disagreement remains, reaching a place of mutual respect keeps relationships intact and leaves room for future cooperation. Sometimes the most powerful sentence you can offer is simply this: "I understand how you see the situation. Even though my perspective is different, I respect where you're coming from." Statements like this show maturity and emotional intelligence. They prevent disagreements from becoming personal battles. As you practice handling difficult conversations with care, you will notice something interesting. Your confidence begins to grow, because you realize that tension does not have to destroy relationships. Handled skillfully, it can actually deepen them. And as your confidence grows, you begin discovering another remarkable aspect of communication: the ability to make people feel seen, valued, and important. This skill, often described as charisma, is far less mysterious than most people believe. Chapter 8. The art of making people feel like they matter. Think about the most magnetic person you have ever met. Not necessarily the most famous, not the loudest voice in the room, not even the most conventionally impressive. Instead, think about the person who made you feel like you mattered. The one who, when they spoke with you, seemed completely present. The one who asked questions that made you think. The one who listened so attentively that you walked away from the conversation feeling lighter, clearer, maybe even more confident than when it began. If you try to explain exactly what made that person so compelling, it may feel difficult to put into words. People often call this quality charisma. But charisma is not a mysterious trait given to a lucky few. It is a pattern of behavior, and at the center of that pattern is one simple principle: making other people feel seen. In a world filled with constant distraction, phones buzzing, notifications flashing, attention scattered in 10 different directions, The simple act of giving someone your full attention has become extraordinarily rare, and rarity creates value. When someone senses that your attention is completely with them, something shifts inside their nervous system. They relax, they open up, they begin sharing thoughts that might otherwise remain hidden. Presence creates trust. Trust creates connection, and connection creates influence. The foundation of presence is attention. During a conversation, your mind will naturally wander. It will think about tasks waiting for you later in the day. It will remember a message you need to send or a problem you need to solve. This is normal. The skill of presence is not about eliminating distraction entirely. It is about noticing when your attention drifts and gently bringing it back to the person in front of you. Back to their words. Back to their expression. Back to the emotional energy of the moment. Over time, this practice strengthens your ability to stay engaged for longer periods, and the quality of your conversations deepens. Another powerful habit among charismatic communicators is asking questions that go beyond surface-level conversation. Many everyday exchanges follow predictable scripts. How was your weekend? Good. Busy. How's work? Fine. You know how it is. These interactions are polite but shallow. They allow conversation to pass without creating meaningful connection. Charismatic communicators gently interrupt this pattern. Instead of asking how someone's weekend was, they might ask, "What was the best part of your weekend?" Instead of asking how work is going, they might ask, "What project has you most excited right now?" These small changes in phrasing invite richer responses. They signal genuine curiosity rather than routine politeness. But asking meaningful questions is only the first step. The real impact comes from how you respond to the answers. When someone shares something personal or thoughtful, follow-up questions demonstrate that you were truly listening. If someone mentions a hobby they enjoy, you might ask what first got them interested in it. If they mention a challenge they are facing, you might ask what part of the situation feels most difficult. This kind of engagement shows that you value their perspective, and feeling valued is a powerful emotional experience. Finding authentic common ground also strengthens connection. This does not mean pretending to share interests you do not have. People sense insincerity quickly. Instead, look for genuine overlaps in experience. Maybe both of you have navigated the challenge of starting a new role. Maybe you share similar goals or values. Maybe you both appreciate the same kind of humor. Even small connections create a sense of familiarity. They remind people that they are not alone in their experiences. Matching energy is another subtle skill. Every person carries a certain emotional tempo in conversation. Some speak calmly and reflectively. Others are animated and enthusiastic. When you adjust your own energy slightly to match the rhythm of the other person, the interaction begins to feel more harmonious. This does not mean copying them mechanically. It simply means meeting them where they are emotionally. If someone is speaking thoughtfully and slowly, rushing your responses may feel jarring. If someone is excited and expressive, responding with flat indifference can feel dismissive. Attunement creates comfort. Comfort deepens connection. Another powerful but often overlooked tool is validation. Validation means acknowledging someone's experience as real and understandable. For example, if someone describes a frustrating situation, you might say, "That sounds incredibly challenging." Or, "I can see why that would feel frustrating." Notice what validation does not require. It does not require agreement. You can validate someone's feelings without sharing their conclusion. Validation simply communicates that you are taking their experience seriously. And for many people, that alone is deeply meaningful. Storytelling also plays an important role in connection. When you share personal experiences, especially ones that include challenges, mistakes, or lessons learned, you reveal something human about yourself. Perfection creates distance, but vulnerability creates relatability. A story about a moment when you struggled with something similar to what the other person is experiencing can create an immediate sense of shared understanding. It communicates a quiet message. I've been there too. Using someone's name during conversation can also strengthen connection when done naturally. A person's name is deeply tied to their identity. Hearing it used sincerely during conversation signals recognition and personal attention. But like any technique, moderation matters. Overusing someone's name can feel artificial. Use it occasionally and authentically. Specific appreciation is another powerful way to make people feel valued. Generic compliments, such as "great job," often fade quickly. But detailed appreciation leaves a lasting impression. Instead of saying "nice presentation," you might say, "The way you explained that complex idea with such clarity really helped the whole group understand it." Specific recognition shows that you noticed not just the outcome, but the effort and thought behind it. That kind of acknowledgement is rare, and people remember it. Energy management is also essential. It is difficult to be present for others when you are exhausted, overwhelmed, or emotionally drained. Taking care of your own well-being through rest, boundaries, and self-reflection allows you to show up fully during interactions that matter. Presence requires energy, and energy must be replenished. Humor, when used thoughtfully, can also strengthen connection. Shared laughter releases tension and builds positive associations between people. But effective humor never depends on belittling someone else. It emerges from shared observations, everyday absurdities, or gentle self-awareness. The goal is not to impress people with jokes. It is to create moments of shared lightness. Ultimately, charisma is not about performance. It is about orientation. It is the decision to move through the world with genuine curiosity about the people you encounter. It is the willingness to treat every conversation as an opportunity to make someone feel acknowledged rather than overlooked. When that orientation becomes natural, all the techniques we discussed, questions, listening, validation, appreciation, flow naturally, because they come from a sincere belief that every person you speak with carries a story worth hearing. And when people feel that belief in your presence, something remarkable happens. They trust you. The trust opens the door to one of the most powerful dimensions of communication: influence. Chapter 9. Ethical Influence and the Art of Changing Minds. The word persuasion often makes people uncomfortable. For some, it conjures images of manipulation, convincing others to do something against their interests, pushing people toward decisions they would not have made otherwise. But real persuasion is something very different. True persuasion is not about overpowering someone's thinking. It is about expanding it. It is the process of helping another person see possibilities, connections, and information that were previously outside their awareness. It invites them to reconsider a perspective, not because they were forced to, but because the new understanding genuinely makes sense. In this way, persuasion becomes an act of service. When you help someone see the full picture of a decision, both the opportunities and the risks, you empower them to make choices with greater clarity. That is not manipulation. That is leadership. The foundation of ethical influence is understanding. Before you attempt to persuade anyone, you must first understand their world. What are they trying to achieve? What problems are they trying to solve? What pressures shape their decisions? What fears or uncertainties might make them hesitant to change direction? When you invest time in answering these questions, something important happens. You earn trust, and trust is the currency of influence. Without trust, even the strongest argument can feel suspicious. With trust, even a simple suggestion can carry weight. One principle that often shapes persuasion is reciprocity. Human beings have a deep instinct to return kindness. When someone offers genuine help, sharing useful information, providing support, making a thoughtful introduction, we naturally feel inclined to respond with goodwill. This is not about keeping score. It is about creating a pattern of generosity. When people consistently experience you as someone who contributes value, they begin to associate your presence with positive outcomes. And when that pattern exists, they become more open to your ideas. Another psychological force that shapes human decisions is social proof. When people are uncertain about a choice, they often look to others for guidance. They ask themselves questions such as, what have people like me done in this situation? What results did they experience? Stories that demonstrate how others successfully navigated a similar challenge can therefore be extremely persuasive. But the key word is similar. The examples you share must feel relevant to the listener's circumstances. Otherwise, they appear distant or unrealistic. Authenticity matters here. Fabricated stories or exaggerated claims may produce short-term agreement, but they erode credibility the moment they are discovered. And once credibility is lost, influence disappears. Another powerful dynamic in persuasion is consistency. Most people want their actions to align with their values and previous decisions. When you can show how your idea connects naturally with beliefs someone already holds, the proposal feels less like a dramatic change and more like a logical next step. You are not asking them to abandon their identity. You are inviting them to act in alignment with it. For example, if someone values efficiency and thoughtful planning, presenting an idea as a way to improve organization may resonate strongly. You are connecting the proposal to a value they already respect. Scarcity and urgency also influence decision-making, but they must be used with care. When a genuine opportunity has limited availability or a real deadline, sharing that information helps people make informed choices about timing. But artificial urgency, pressure created solely to force quick decisions, damages trust. People eventually recognize the difference. Legitimate urgency informs. Manipulated urgency deceives. One of the most effective persuasion strategies is helping people see the full cost of inaction. Often when people evaluate a decision, they focus only on the risks of change. They ask themselves what might go wrong if they take action. But every decision also carries a cost for doing nothing. Opportunities may pass. Problems may worsen. Potential benefits may remain unrealized. When you gently illuminate both sides of the equation, you allow people to make decisions based on a more complete understanding. This expands their perspective rather than restricting it. Credibility also plays an essential role in influence. People are naturally more receptive to ideas from individuals they perceive as knowledgeable and trustworthy. But credibility does not come from pretending to know everything. In fact, honesty about your limitations often strengthens trust. Saying something like, "That question is outside my expertise, but I can connect you with someone who knows more," demonstrates integrity. People trust advisors who prioritize truth over appearance. Logic is another component of persuasion, but logic alone rarely motivates action. People may intellectually understand an argument without feeling compelled to act on it. Emotion bridges that gap. When you help someone imagine how their situation could improve, how their work might become easier, how their goals might become more achievable. The idea becomes vivid. They begin to see the potential outcome rather than just the abstract concept. This emotional engagement transforms understanding into motivation. But emotional appeals must always be grounded in reality. Overpromising creates disappointment, and disappointment damages trust more deeply than disagreement ever could. Another powerful persuasion strategy is collaboration. Instead of presenting your idea as a finished solution, invite others to participate in shaping it. Ask for their input. Consider their suggestions. Incorporate their insights. When people feel that they contributed to the final idea, something remarkable happens. They begin to see it as their own, and people naturally support ideas they helped create. Timing also matters enormously. Even the most thoughtful proposal can fail if it arrives at the wrong moment. People are often more receptive to new ideas when they are already questioning the status quo, when they feel dissatisfied with current results, or are facing new challenges. Recognizing these moments requires patience and awareness. Sometimes the most persuasive action is simply waiting until the other person is ready to listen. True influence is not about forcing agreement. It is about expanding possibility. It invites people to see their choices more clearly and then respects their ability to decide. When persuasion comes from a place of genuine care, people sense it. They may not always accept your ideas immediately, but they remember the conversation, and they return to you later because they know your influence helps them think more clearly. But influence alone is not enough to sustain powerful communication. There is another force that often disrupts even the best preparation: pressure. Moments when the stakes feel high, when your heart beats faster, when the room becomes silent and all attention turns toward you. Understanding how to navigate these moments transforms nervous energy from an obstacle into a powerful ally. Chapter 10. Turning pressure into rocket fuel. There is a moment that almost everyone recognizes. You are about to speak. Maybe it is a presentation. Maybe it is a job interview. Maybe it is simply sharing an idea in a room where the stakes feel higher than usual. Your body begins reacting before you consciously think about it. Your heartbeat accelerates. Your hands feel slightly warmer. Your breathing becomes quicker. And immediately a familiar thought appears. I'm nervous. For most people, that thought carries a negative meaning. Nervousness feels like a warning sign, as if the body is announcing that something is wrong. The mind begins predicting mistakes. It imagines embarrassment. It scans the future for possible failure. But here is the truth that changes everything. Those sensations are not a sign that something is wrong. They are a sign that your body is preparing for performance. Your nervous system is activating energy so you can think faster, focus more sharply, and respond more quickly to the situation in front of you. The problem is not the physical sensation. The problem is the interpretation. When the brain interprets these signals as danger, it tightens. Muscles contract. Breathing becomes shallow. Thinking narrows toward self-protection. But when the same signals are interpreted as readiness, the body organizes that energy differently. Instead of panic, the system produces alertness. Instead of tension, it produces engagement. The physiological sensations of anxiety and excitement are almost identical. Both involve increased heart rate, heightened awareness, and a surge of energy through the body. The only real difference is the story your mind attaches to the experience. One story says, something bad might happen. The other story says, something important is about to happen. And the story you choose shapes the outcome. This is not simply motivational advice. Research has shown that people who reinterpret stress as helpful rather than harmful perform better under pressure. Their blood vessels remain more relaxed. Their cognitive flexibility stays intact. Their bodies deliver energy to the brain rather than shutting down higher reasoning. Same chemistry, different meaning, different performance. Understanding what happens inside your body during pressure gives you tools to work with the experience rather than against it. When the brain perceives high stakes, the sympathetic nervous system activates. This system releases adrenaline and cortisol, hormones designed for rapid physical action. These hormones were incredibly useful when survival depended on running away from danger. But when you need to speak clearly and think logically, the same response can interfere with your performance. Fortunately, there is a direct pathway to calm your nervous system. Breathing. Your breath acts as a bridge between conscious control and automatic bodily processes. By changing the rhythm of your breathing, you send signals directly to your nervous system. One particularly effective technique involves lengthening the exhale. Try this pattern. Inhale slowly through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold that breath gently for 7 seconds. Then exhale slowly through your mouth for 8 seconds. Repeat this cycle 4 times. The extended exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for relaxation and recovery. Within a minute or two, your body begins shifting from alarm mode to a calmer, more focused state. Your thoughts clear. Your shoulders loosen. Your voice steadies. Another critical factor in handling pressure is preparation, but not the kind of preparation most people rely on. Many speakers attempt to memorize exactly what they will say. They write out scripts and rehearse sentences word for word. At first, this seems helpful because it creates a sense of control, but memorization has a hidden weakness. When pressure interferes with memory, which it often does, the entire structure collapses. If you forget even a small portion of the script, the mind scrambles to recover, and the anxiety increases. A stronger approach is what I call flexible mastery. Instead of memorizing exact sentences, focus on understanding your material deeply. Know the key ideas you want to express. Understand the relationships between those ideas. Practice explaining them in different ways. Use different examples. Experiment with different analogies. When you know your material from multiple angles, losing one phrase does not matter. You simply take another path to the same destination. This flexibility creates genuine confidence because you trust your ability to adapt. Visualization can also be a powerful preparation tool. Before an important speaking moment, imagine the situation vividly. Picture the environment. See the faces of the people you will be addressing. Hear yourself speaking calmly and clearly. But do not imagine perfection alone. Also imagine small challenges. Visualize losing your place briefly and recovering smoothly. Picture someone asking a difficult question and responding thoughtfully. These mental rehearsals train your brain to navigate pressure before the real moment arrives. Your body also plays a role in pressure management. Sleep, exercise, and nutrition influence your baseline level of stress. When your body is exhausted or overstimulated, your nervous system reacts more strongly to pressure. On days when you expect an important speaking moment, be mindful of your physical state. Avoid excessive caffeine, which can intensify symptoms of anxiety. Eat something that provides steady energy. Arrive early so you can become familiar with the environment rather than rushing in at the last moment. Small physical adjustments can create a calmer starting point. During the moment itself, grounding techniques can help return your attention to the present. One simple exercise involves engaging your senses. Notice 5 things you can see around you. Notice 4 physical sensations you can feel. Perhaps the floor beneath your feet or the texture of your clothing. Notice 3 sounds you can hear. This process anchors your mind in the present environment instead of the imagined future where mistakes are amplified. Another effective technique is progressive muscle relaxation. Starting with your toes, gently tense the muscles for 5 seconds, then release them. Move gradually upward through your legs, abdomen, shoulders, and face. The contrast between tension and relaxation helps your body release accumulated stress. But perhaps the most important shift involves your relationship with mistakes. Many people assume that a small error during a presentation or conversation will destroy their credibility. In reality, audiences are far more forgiving than your inner critic suggests. Most listeners are focused on understanding your message. They are not auditing your performance for minor imperfections. In fact, a small stumble followed by a calm recovery often goes unnoticed. Develop simple strategies for handling these moments. If you lose your train of thought, pause briefly and say something like, "Let me take a moment to express that clearly." This gives your mind time to reorganize while signaling thoughtfulness rather than confusion. If you misspeak, correct the sentence briefly and continue. The less attention you draw to the mistake, the less anyone else notices it. Pressure tolerance develops gradually. Just as physical strength increases through repeated exercise, your ability to remain calm during high-stakes communication grows through exposure. Start with smaller speaking opportunities. Share an idea in a meeting. Offer a comment during a discussion. Ask a thoughtful question during a presentation. Each successful experience adds evidence to your brain that these situations are manageable. Over time, your threshold for anxiety rises. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin to feel energizing instead. Finally, there is one shift that transforms pressure more than any technique. Move your focus away from yourself. When you are consumed with thoughts about how you appear, whether you might make a mistake, or what others think of you, your attention becomes trapped inside your own mind. This amplifies anxiety. But when you redirect your attention toward the people in front of you, asking yourself how you can help them understand, how you can make the idea clearer, how you can contribute something useful, your energy changes. Your nervousness transforms into purpose, and purpose quiets fear. Pressure, then, becomes a signal. It tells you that you are stepping into moments that matter. Moments where your voice has the potential to create impact. Instead of resisting that energy, learn to guide it. The butterflies do not need to disappear. They simply need to learn how to fly in formation. And when they do, another opportunity opens. The opportunity to step forward confidently in front of others and share your ideas with clarity, presence, and influence. Chapter 11. Speaking so people remember. Think back to the last presentation you listened to. Not the best one, just the most recent. If you are honest, you may remember only fragments, a slide or two, perhaps a single idea, maybe nothing at all. This is not because the speaker lacked intelligence or effort. It is because human attention has limits. Most audiences forget the majority of what they hear within hours, unless something about the message captures their memory. The question every communicator must answer, therefore, is not simply, "What do I want to say?" The real question is, "What do I want people to remember?" Once you ask that question, the structure of your communication begins to change. Instead of delivering a long stream of information, you begin shaping ideas into patterns that the brain can hold on to. Memory loves structure. Without structure, even brilliant insights slip away. But when ideas are organized clearly, they become easier to follow, easier to process, and far more likely to remain in the listener's mind. One of the simplest and most effective structures is the rule of three. The human brain naturally groups information into small clusters. When ideas are presented in sets of three, they feel balanced and complete. Consider how often this pattern appears in memorable communication. Beginning, middle, end, past, present, future. Problem, solution, outcome. When you organize your message around three core points, your audience has a mental framework to follow. They know where they are in the journey of your explanation. Another powerful technique is previewing. Before diving into details, briefly tell your audience what you are about to explain. For example, today I want to explore 3 reasons why communication anxiety happens and what you can do to overcome each one. Now the audience knows what to expect. Their mind begins preparing places to store the information as it arrives. As you move through each section, remind them where they are. That was the first reason. Now let's look at the second. These small signals help the listener stay oriented. Stories are another powerful memory tool. Facts inform the mind, but stories engage the imagination. When information is embedded inside a story, the brain processes it differently. Instead of storing isolated data, it remembers characters, events, and emotional moments. A well-chosen story can carry an idea further than 10 minutes of explanation. Imagine explaining the importance of preparation in public speaking. You could present research studies and statistics about performance improvement. Or you could tell a story about a moment when someone stepped onto a stage unprepared, froze under pressure, and then transformed their results after learning a new approach. Which one do you think people will remember tomorrow? Stories create mental images, and images anchor memory. Another technique that strengthens memory is contrast. The brain notices differences. When you show how 2 situations diverge, success versus failure, confusion versus clarity, tension versus calm, the comparison sharpens understanding. For example, instead of describing effective listening in abstract terms, you might contrast 2 short scenarios. One conversation where a person interrupts constantly, and another where the listener demonstrates full attention. The contrast makes the lesson obvious. Repetition also plays a role in retention. But repetition must be thoughtful. Simply repeating the same sentence over and over feels tedious. Instead, restate important ideas using slightly different language. Introduce the idea early. Illustrate it with an example. Return to it again near the end. Each repetition strengthens the memory trace in the listener's mind. Visual language can also improve recall. When your words help people picture something, the idea becomes more concrete. Instead of saying, "Clear communication improves teamwork," you might say, "Clear communication acts like a map." When everyone sees the same path, the team stops wandering in different directions. The image of a map remains long after the sentence ends. Simplicity is another key principle. Many speakers overload their audience with too much information at once. They believe that more data makes their message stronger. In reality, excessive detail often weakens communication. The listener's mind becomes crowded. The core idea disappears inside the complexity. Great communicators focus on clarity first. They remove unnecessary information. They ask themselves a difficult question. If the audience remembers only one idea from this entire message, what should it be? Once that idea becomes clear, everything else supports it. Timing also affects memory. People remember beginnings and endings far more easily than the middle of a presentation. This is known as the primacy and recency effect. The opening moments capture attention and set expectations. The closing moments leave the final emotional impression. That is why strong openings and strong conclusions matter so much. A powerful opening might begin with a surprising fact, a compelling question, or a short story that immediately pulls the audience into the topic. A powerful conclusion does not simply repeat information. It reminds the audience why the message matters. It connects the ideas back to their lives. It leaves them with a clear takeaway. Delivery also influences memory. Variation in tone, pacing, and emphasis highlights important points. When the voice becomes slightly slower or quieter before a key idea, the listener instinctively senses that something important is coming. These subtle cues guide attention. Interaction strengthens memory as well. When listeners participate, by answering questions, reflecting on examples, or imagining how an idea applies to their own situation, the information moves from passive hearing to active engagement. Active engagement strengthens learning. Finally, emotional resonance makes ideas unforgettable. People may forget the exact words you used, but they remember how your message made them feel. Did it inspire them? Challenge them? Encourage them? Give them clarity about something they had struggled to understand. Emotion acts like glue for memory. It binds ideas to experience. When information connects with meaning, the brain stores it more deeply. All of these techniques share a common purpose. They help transform communication from a stream of words into an experience that stays with people long after the conversation ends. But as your ability to speak clearly grows, something else begins to change: your identity. Because communication is not just a skill you use occasionally, it is part of how you move through the world every day, and mastering it gradually reshapes how you see yourself and how others see you. Chapter 12. Becoming the person who can speak. At the beginning of this journey, communication may have felt like a skill you were trying to improve. You wanted to speak more clearly. You wanted to feel less nervous. You wanted your ideas to land more effectively. Those goals are important. But something deeper happens as you practice the principles we've explored together. Communication stops being something you occasionally do. It becomes part of who you are, because every time you choose to express an idea instead of keeping it to yourself, you reinforce a new identity. The identity of someone who participates, someone who contributes, someone whose voice matters. This shift does not happen all at once. It develops through small moments. The first time you ask a thoughtful question during a meeting instead of staying silent. The first time you offer a perspective that helps clarify a discussion. The first time you navigate a difficult conversation with calm rather than avoidance. Each of these moments sends a signal to your brain. I am capable of speaking. And with repetition, that signal grows stronger. Confidence, contrary to popular belief, is not a personality trait. It is evidence. Evidence your brain collects through experience. When you repeatedly show yourself that you can handle situations that once felt intimidating, your nervous system updates its expectations. What once triggered anxiety begins to feel normal. What once required courage begins to feel natural. Eventually, the identity shifts. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who is trying to become a better communicator. You simply become someone who communicates. And when that identity takes hold, something remarkable happens. Other people begin to see it too. Because identity influences presence. Your posture changes subtly. Your voice carries more steadiness. Your words arrive with greater clarity. People begin to notice. They may not say it directly, but they sense that something about your presence feels grounded and trustworthy. This is how influence quietly grows. Not through dramatic transformation, but through consistent expression. Of course, the journey never truly ends. Even the most accomplished communicators continue refining their craft. They notice new patterns in conversation. They experiment with different ways of explaining ideas. They observe how people respond and adjust accordingly. Communication remains a living skill, but the foundation becomes stable. You know how to calm your nervous system when pressure appears. You know how to listen deeply enough to understand what someone truly means. You know how to structure your thoughts so others can follow them. You know how to choose words that create clarity rather than confusion. These abilities do not eliminate every moment of uncertainty, but they give you tools, and tools create confidence. There will still be days when you stumble over a sentence, moments when an idea comes out less clearly than you intended, conversations where misunderstanding appears despite your best effort. That is part of being human. Communication is not a mechanical process. It is a relationship between living minds. What matters is not perfection. What matters is participation. Every time you speak honestly, listen attentively, and approach conversation with curiosity, you strengthen the skill. You strengthen the identity. And gradually, the fear that once surrounded speaking begins to fade. In its place grows something far more powerful, a sense of ownership over your voice. You realize that your ideas deserve space in the world. Your experiences contain insights that others may benefit from hearing. Your perspective adds something unique to every conversation you enter. When you truly understand this, communication stops feeling like a performance. It becomes an act of contribution. You speak not to prove yourself, but to share something meaningful. You listen not simply to respond, but to understand. And when these two forces, expression and understanding, come together, communication becomes more than a skill. It becomes a bridge between thoughts and actions, between people and possibilities, between the person you once believed you were and the person you are becoming. Your voice is one of the most powerful tools you will ever carry, not because it is perfect, but because it is yours. And the moment you decide to use it fully, the world begins to hear something it has never heard before. Your perspective, your clarity, your truth. The journey of communication, then, is not about becoming someone else. It is about uncovering the voice that has always been waiting inside you. And once that voice is free, the conversations you create have the power to change more than a single moment. They can change the direction of a life, including your own. Chapter 13. The quiet power of a well-chosen word. There is a moment in many people's lives when they realize something unexpected. The conversations they once thought were small were never small at all. A sentence spoken at the right time can change a relationship. A question asked with curiosity can open a door someone thought was closed forever. A simple expression of belief can give someone the courage to attempt something they once believed was impossible. Communication shapes the invisible architecture of human life. Careers shift because of conversations. Friendships deepen because of conversations. Conflicts dissolve because someone finally chooses words that bring understanding instead of resistance. Yet most of these moments happen quietly. Not on stages, not in front of crowds, but across kitchen tables, inside meeting rooms, in the spaces between two people who decide to speak honestly. This is the deeper power of communication. It is not limited to presentations or speeches. It lives in everyday interaction. Think about how often a single sentence stays with you for years. Perhaps someone once told you, "I believe in your ability." Maybe a mentor said something that changed how you saw your potential. Maybe a friend offered a perspective that helped you see a problem differently. The sentence itself may have been simple, but the timing made it powerful. Because words spoken at the right moment enter the mind differently. They become reference points. They shape the internal dialogue people carry long after the conversation ends. This is why responsible communication matters. Every word you choose has the potential to influence someone's internal world. A careless comment can reinforce doubt. A thoughtful sentence can reinforce confidence. You may never know the full impact of what you say, but the impact is real. The most thoughtful communicators understand this responsibility. They do not treat language casually. They recognize that words carry emotional weight, and because of that awareness, they choose their language with care. This does not mean speaking cautiously or walking on eggshells. It means speaking consciously. When someone shares an idea, you can respond in ways that either shut down the conversation or invite it to continue. A dismissive reaction might end the exchange instantly, but a curious question might open an entirely new direction of thought. The difference lies in intention. Do your words create space, or do they close it? Another quiet power of communication is encouragement. Many people move through life carrying hidden doubts. They wonder if they are capable. They question whether their efforts are meaningful. A sincere acknowledgement of someone's progress can have extraordinary impact. Not exaggerated praise, not flattery, but genuine recognition. You handled that situation thoughtfully. I appreciate the effort you put into this. I can see how much you've improved. Statements like these reinforce growth. They show people that their effort matters. And when people feel that their effort matters, they continue. Encouragement fuels persistence. There is also power in asking the right question. Questions guide thinking. They direct attention. A narrow question may produce a narrow answer, but a thoughtful question can help someone explore ideas they had never considered. Instead of asking, "Why did this go wrong?" you might ask, "What can we learn from what happened?" Instead of asking, "Is this possible?" you might ask, "What would make this possible?" The direction of the question shapes the direction of the mind. Great leaders understand this deeply. They do not control conversations through commands. They guide them through questions. And sometimes the most powerful communication is not what you say. It is what you choose not to say. Restraint is a form of wisdom. Not every disagreement requires immediate correction. Not every misunderstanding requires argument. There are moments when listening fully creates more progress than speaking. There are moments when silence communicates respect. Learning when to pause is as valuable as learning when to speak. The mature communicator understands timing. Timing turns ordinary sentences into memorable ones. Another dimension of communication involves storytelling. Stories allow ideas to travel across generations. Long before written language existed, human beings shared knowledge through stories around fires. Stories helped people remember lessons about survival, cooperation, and meaning. Even today, the human brain responds to stories differently than to abstract information. When someone tells a story, listeners imagine scenes unfolding. They visualize people. They experience emotions connected to the narrative. The lesson becomes embodied rather than theoretical. This is why stories remain one of the most effective ways to communicate ideas. They make information human. They transform knowledge into experience. But storytelling also requires honesty. The most meaningful stories are not about perfection. They include moments of struggle, moments of uncertainty, moments where the outcome was not obvious. These moments make the story relatable. They remind listeners that growth often emerges from difficulty. Communication also shapes identity. The way you describe your experiences influences how you understand yourself. If you repeatedly tell the story of your life through the lens of limitation, your mind reinforces that narrative. But if you describe your experiences through the lens of learning and resilience, your identity evolves. Language becomes a mirror that reflects possibility. And eventually, that mirror shapes reality. The words you choose about your own life matter, just as the words you offer to others matter. As your communication becomes more thoughtful, something interesting begins to happen. People start seeking your perspective. They come to you for advice. They invite your opinion. Not because you dominate conversations, but because you contribute clarity. People trust voices that bring clarity, and clarity is rare in a noisy world. But remember something important. Communication is not about becoming the most impressive voice in the room. It is about becoming a voice that adds value, a voice that helps people think more clearly, a voice that strengthens understanding rather than division. When you approach communication with that intention, influence grows naturally, because people are drawn to those who help them see the world more clearly. In the end, the goal of communication is not control. It is connection. Connection between ideas, connection between people, connection between possibilities and action. And every meaningful connection begins with something simple, a single word, chosen carefully, spoken with intention, heard by someone who needed to hear it. Final chapter. Before we finish this audiobook, I want to leave you with a few personal thoughts. After years of observing conversations and studying communication, one thing has become very clear to me. Most people underestimate the value of their own voice. They wait. They wait until they feel more confident. They wait until they feel more prepared. But the truth is, confidence rarely comes before speaking. It comes because you speak. Many of the best communicators I've seen didn't start with natural confidence. They built it slowly, through awkward attempts, imperfect sentences, and conversations that didn't go exactly as planned. That's normal. Communication is a skill built through repetition, not perfection. Another lesson I've learned is that great communication isn't about talking the most. It's about understanding people. The individuals who leave the strongest impression are often the ones who listen deeply and respond thoughtfully. When people feel heard, they trust you, and trust makes your words far more powerful. So if I could give you one simple piece of advice, it would be this. Don't wait until you feel perfectly ready to speak. Ask the question. Share the idea. Say the thing that might help someone think differently. Your words don't need to be perfect to matter. Communication isn't about impressing people. It's about contributing something meaningful to the moment. And every time you choose to speak with clarity, curiosity, and respect, you make the conversation better. So wherever your next conversation happens, at work, with friends, or with someone you care about, I hope you remember something simple. Your voice already has value. You only need to use it.